Welcome to this edition of the $1 Million Mastermind Podcast. This is where we pick the brains of high achievers from all walks of life and get their hard-earned, real-world insights on winning. I'm your host, Larry Weidel. All right, I'm excited about this broadcast because I've got a longtime friend who's such a role model. He's a hero all over the United States, but also primarily in Canada. He operates out of Vancouver. Help me welcome Brad Girard.
Hey, Larry. It's good to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you here, Brad. And people need to find, this is a great chance for people to get familiar. They think all you Canadians are weird, so maybe you can help dispel that notion. You think?
Well, I don't know if I can or not.
Maybe you are weird. Maybe you are.
I think we are.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
Different.
Those Canadians are different. But as we were talking earlier, you might kind of explain this thing. You started business. The whole idea is getting independent and building your own thing. And you started 22 years old. You said you had the idea of passive income. So you started your own business in 86 and tried several, but basically it wasn't so much they failed as your interest failed in them once you found out they were super labor intensive, because you were primarily wanting to go into business for yourself so you could build up something that would generate passive income. So talk about that for a second.
Well, I'm sure, I know you would remember, maybe a lot of people wouldn't, but I used to watch a show when I remember as a teenager in a little farmhouse in central Alberta, and I grew up in a really poor type home, but we had a TV, and I used to watch a show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And, I think a lot of people watch shows like that, and they, and maybe they're envious, or they get jealous, or they get angry even at the kind of wealth that other people have. And I looked at it and said, and people would look at those people and think, oh, they're lucky. Those pretty people are lucky people. And I looked at it and said, what do they do that we're not doing? What does my dad do different than those people that they can have that kind of lifestyle and we have to live like this? And so I realized pretty early on in my life that at the end of the day, you have to, unless you're very fortunate to be blessed with an amazing voice or, a beautiful face, you have to get in business, of some sort. And at 22 years old, somebody handed me an article by a guy who at 15 had written out, he had told this story of at 15 years old in Los Angeles. He wrote something called his life list, a list of 129 items that he wanted to do before he died. And then he spent his entire life knocking off those items, living just adventure to adventure. And I thought, what a great way to spend your life, living adventure to adventure. The challenge is, how do you finance that list? If you have a job, nobody will ever give you enough time off to go and knock off 8 or 10 adventures, because I got the article when he was 59, and he'd knocked off 106 of the 129 items. And he had things on there like climb Kilimanjaro and the Matterhorn and ride an elephant and fly a fighter jet and all these different adventures. And not one adventure on there was get a good job with a big company. And so I sat down at 22 and wrote out my life list and realized very early into it that I was basically screwed for a job. Nobody would ever pay me enough money to go and knock off all these items or give you enough time off. So I knew I had to find a different way to finance my life. And that's really what set me out looking for a business. And so I tried a number of businesses. I did pressure washing, window washing. I started a nanny agency. I started an advertising business. And listen, I'm a total introvert. And, and so all of it was out of my comfort zone. Everything to do with people was out of my comfort zone. But I had this list that demanded my action. And so I got fortunate in 1988. I was introduced to a lady who was working in the financial industry, and she told me she was making a lot of money on a monthly basis. And when she showed me her check stubs, I said, I'm in. I know nothing about this, but what I do know is that if you can find a good mentor and you follow what they tell you, you can achieve equal results. And so that's how I got started in the financial industry.
Well, Brad, I remember you remind me of Mark Cuban on that Shark Tank thing. Early in the history of that show, they had a lady, nice lady, she came out, and young lady had some kind of idea of something. And he said, well, what have you done about it to market? Have you been to trade shows? Have you been here? Have you been there? And she said, no, I'm just kind of shy. That's not my personality. And he said, well, I'm out. If you're passionate about your idea and wanting to build your business, business of your own with this, is not strong enough to make you burst out of that shyness and that being an introvert, then you're not going to have the passion it is going to require to do about 1,000 other things you're going to have to do to make this thing successful. So I'm out, and right from the beginning, what I'm hearing from you is that, just writing down, first of all, you were looking. And then the thing is that just the idea of writing down a whole, nobody ever exposed me to that 100 list. I've heard that 1,000 times over my lifetime, but in the beginning, I'd never heard about that. But, just the thing at age 21, 22, to sit down with a piece of paper and write down a bunch of crazy stuff, just kind of wakes up all kind of cells inside your mind of possibilities that would be dormant. Because if you got it down on a piece of paper, this is a checklist for me, you're going to, as you go through life and you hear about this one or that, the other, that's going to ring a bell with you, and that's going to stick with you. And you might learn about, oh, that's where that is. That's how they did that. And you can kind of be programming and training and preconditioning yourself to actually pull some of those things off just by going through life. And the fact that you've kind of woken up those brain cells in your mind to consider the possibility of actually doing that. You think in a bigger terms than 99.9% of the people out there. And, when we talked about doing this call, it was like, I told you, the first segment here, I wanted to do like the first time you got convinced that you could make your own way in the world, and are setting yourself up for winning, but long-term winning. Because as you know, because of my book, I'm all into serial winning, winning again and again. Because once you taste success, you certainly don't want to lose it. You don't want to do one, or if you have a list of 100 things you want to do, you don't want to do 5 of them and say, okay, I'm going to lose my focus now. That's it. No, you want to keep the taste of victory and success and fun in your life going, that hope, that anticipation, that living inspired versus living depressed. And so you talked to me about, I talked about how you first got the idea you could actually make your way in the world. And you said that you kind of figured out, and the way you looked at it, it was a process. Like you may start in the beginning like a shapeless ball of clay, like in Genesis 1, it says, the world was, null and void, shapeless. And then God went to work and made order out of chaos there. We start off, we're not finished products, but you said you looked at this as starting as a ball of clay and then going through the process to turn yourself into something. Speak about that for a minute.
Just to go back to what one of the comments you made, I think there's no greater waste in the world than the waste of human potential that is left on the field and never used. And I think the biggest challenge is most people look at their life and the way they live their life is based upon, we go get an education and we get the best job we can possibly get. that pays us the most money we can possibly make. And then our life becomes a byproduct of whatever that paycheck will allow us to live. And so we shrink our dreams into that paycheck. And all I did was, I think that's the wrong way to live your life. I think that what you need to do is figure out what's the greatest life that you would like to live. And then forget about jobs and careers, but what's the greatest life you'd like to live? What is that going to cost you to live a life like that? Now your job is to go and find a way to finance it. And I think the challenge is people just get a job and then they forget about these dreams they had, and they just move into this rut. And someone told me a long time ago, a rut is just, a grave is just a rut with the ends closed in. And I think that's kind of the way most people live their life. So I believe that, and I didn't probably start out this way, but I always believe what one person can do, another person can do. And that if you can find the right mentors, if you can find the right person who can teach you, then you can duplicate their results if you duplicate their thinking and their efforts. I always believe that. And so I was the kind of person who back in the 80s, I was totally broke. I had a wife and a baby early on, 23, 24 years old. And I was spending a lot of money that I didn't have, going to see Tony Robbins and, Jim Rohn when he'd come to town, and all of these people. And people would be like, you have no money and you're spending this money going to these seminars. But what they did was they got me into a belief that I could be more than I am. And I think that a lot of people think that my personality is fixed, my potential is fixed, and the reality is it isn't. You can change your personality, you can change your potential, you can change your future if you're willing to change yourself. And so that's what I did. And if you look at like Apple, right now, Apple came out with iOS 13 in November, and it was a revolutionary update, that brought in all these advances and stuff. But Apple isn't Apple didn't just say, okay, we're done now, we've got our ISO out, and we're just going to leave it. The next day, I can assure you, they're already thinking about iOS 14. And probably even before they roll out 13, they're thinking about 14 and 15 and 16, because the world demands that you change. It demands that you improve and get better if you want to have a piece of the good life. And so I look at myself and I go, if I'm iOS 1 right now, my job is to figure out, how do I become iOS 2 next year and iOS 3 the year after? And I think that a lot of people don't look at themselves that way. They don't see themselves as this growing, changing being who can be better today than they were yesterday. And that's my greatest challenge, is how do I become more valuable to the world, to my business, to my family today than I was yesterday? And the worst thing that can happen, I remember going back to a 20-year high school reunion, and somebody made a comment, or I made a comment, boy, those people haven't changed one bit. And some people think that that's a compliment, but it really isn't. If you're the same person you were in high school, if you talk the same and you have the same thinking and you do the same things, you haven't grown, and you should be completely different 10 years out or 20 years out. And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't. And, so that's my focus, is to try and change who I am and what I learn and what I know and how much value I can bring out into the world. Because at the end of the day, in the free enterprise system, we get paid based on the value we bring to the marketplace. And that's why I've got to become more valuable if I want a better quality of life.
Yeah, and if people are looking for how-to action items from what we're saying here, is if you want to make big things happen in your life, you want to make yourself more valuable to yourself in the world, 3 things we've kind of focused on so far here, and get your reaction to that is, first of all, get specific about what you want. And then get your thinking straight. You talked about, exposing yourself to some people, some books, some tapes, some this, that. Even before we talked, you were saying you're listening to podcasts all the time. Get your thinking organized for success so that you can make these things happen. Because if you're thinking wrong, you're going to act wrong. So it's like, get your targets out there. Get yourself mentally organized for success. And then 3, get your butt in gear and get out there on the hunt to find a vehicle that will allow you to have the discretionary time and discretionary income to go out and make some of these dreams come true. You need to be focusing on your dreams, not on your limitations. And so, is that kind of a pretty good summary of how we've come so far, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Because the idea of doing go ahead.
So I had an opportunity. I lived in Colombia for a couple of years. I was down there working with a World Vision project, and one of the guys I met down there was had been a NASA engineer, and he was in NASA in Houston when they went to the moon, and he said that when the president at the time, John F. Kennedy, said we are going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, nobody really thought that was possible. And he said what they did at this big building that he used to go into every day to NASA, you'd go through this building to get to whatever department you were in. He said when you walked into that building, they had a picture of the moon, like a giant picture of the moon on this wall. And he said what it did is it served to remind you that no matter what you were going through at home or what you were going through in your personal life, that when you stepped foot into that building, you were on a mission, and the mission was very clear. And I think the challenge with a lot of people in their life is they're not on a mission. They don't have a mission that they're obsessed with, that they're trying to accomplish. And so, life just kind of happens to them, and whatever happens, happens. And it's just not a good way to live your life if you want to achieve something great.
All right. Thank you, Brad. This is a fantastic insight to how you launched yourself on this road that eventually led to you becoming a $1 million earner. That's so different than being a millionaire. I mean, you became a millionaire probably decades ago, but getting up to where you have, cash is king in the world, and to have cash flow of over $1 million a year is just staggering. And so thanks for those insights into launching off into a life that can lead you to unlimited success. Thank you, Brad. Thanks for listening to the $1 Million Mastermind. If you felt there were any valuable takeaways from this episode, please take a minute and leave us a 5-star review. Your feedback is important and really helps us get the word out to a wider audience. Remember, we have a valuable webinar that is absolutely free. Register for it right now at whiteoutlanwinning.com. Thanks for listening.